Hello, fellow rebel capitalists. Hope you are well. I had an email yesterday from Simon Black, a good buddy of mine, and he didn't email me personally. I'm just on his email list, and I'd strongly suggest all of you subscribe to his list. It's just free. If you go to sovereignman.com, you can check it out. I interviewed Simon the other day, and I think I actually might be speaking at his event in Dallas in October. My assistant was telling me something about it yesterday, so you might want to check that out. I should be speaking at the New Orleans Investment Conference in October. I guess last time I spoke with Brian, who kind of runs the show over there, he wanted me to speak and then do a panel discussion with Brent Johnson and Jim Grant. So I'm really looking forward to that, but I was going to fly from there over to Dallas for Simon Black's event. So check that out online. But what I want to do today is go over an email from his list yesterday, or the one that he sent to his list yesterday. So I'm just going to, oh, shoot, let me do the screen share. And one thing I love about Simon's emails is he always goes back in history. And it's something I'm going to try to do more often in this channel, because I think when you can relate things to history, it's far more impactful, and it just makes you it just makes a lot more sense. And people learn through storytelling. And when you talk to YouTubers who are very successful, that have millions and millions and millions of subscribers, that's what they'll always tell you, is that you've got to try to incorporate storytelling into what you're doing. And it's because that's just the way we are hardwiring it as human beings. That's how we learn, through telling stories. And that's why you'll notice yourself being far more engaged when there's a story behind the concept that is being explained. And then I just think it's great to study history, because those who study history, I think, have a far better idea or a better understanding of what we may see in the future, or what is currently happening now. So usually I just kind of highlight things, but this email is so incredible. Let me just read it to you. It's pretty short. So Ursula Bach was 18 years old and 6 months pregnant when she heard the news. It was August 13th, 1961, in East Germany, or East Germany's government started building a wall to separate East Berlin from West. Moreover, tens of thousands of East German troops had been deployed overnight to suppress protests and erect makeshift barricades to prevent people from leaving. Ursula Bach had crossed the border back in May, right around the time the East Germans' leader equipped, "Nobody has the intention of building a wall." Yeah, you can always trust the politicians, right? And then it happened. Her world changed overnight. Ursula's fiance, we'll call him Fred, the father of their child, was still in East Berlin, and she knew that she would never see him again. Their son, Andreas, was 28 years old before the wall came down. He grew up never knowing his father, even though Fred technically only lived a few blocks away. He might as well been on Mars. Isn't that unbelievable? This gal just made the decision to get out of Dodge, to get out of Berlin, because she saw the writing on the wall. When she was pregnant, the father stayed and got trapped in Berlin, in East Germany, and wasn't able to see his son for 28 years, although they probably could have thrown a baseball from one house to the other. There are countless other stories like this from the days of the Berlin Wall. Families torn apart and separated for decades. Obviously, what's happening today is nowhere near as heinous as the Berlin Wall, but it's difficult to ignore the whispers of history. Australia is a unique example with some of the most severe cerveza sickness protocols on the planet. And if you haven't read the news, I would strongly suggest doing so. And they'll go into it more in this email. But there a couple towns have actually erected a wall, so the people on one side can't get through, the people on the other side can't get through to the people, let's say on the north and the south. And the article that I read was highlighting Father's Day, how people were literally going to the wall and meeting there just so the fathers could see their children and the children could see their fathers, because they couldn't cross from one side to the other. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. So the entire state of New South Wales, population 7.4 million, locked down a few weeks ago. You can see the why right here. I want to keep it YouTube friendly. In the neighboring state of Victoria, Emperor Dan Andrews Emperor announced yet another lockdown for August 2021, or excuse me, August 21. It was originally supposed to end on September 2nd, but the Emperor had predictably extended the lockdown for several more weeks. Some Australians are starting to realize the truth. Even when certain restrictions are eased, they're never quite out of lockdown. They're merely in between lockdowns. And you guys have heard me say on this channel many times and on Twitter that I don't think the Australians are really being honest, or they don't even think they've even thought about an end game. And I mean the citizens, because the cerveza sickness isn't going away. It's here to stay, guys. It's just the reality of the situation. If you do the research, it's not me saying that. It's all the, I don't know how to say this in a way that won't get this video blocked, but if you even look at all the experts, according to CNN and the mainstream media, they even admit that there's probably a very low probability of us ever getting rid of the cerveza sickness, and the current medicines that we have will not do it because of the different strains, and because the R naught value, and because even with the medicines, it's still transmittable. So I don't want to go into that. You guys have heard me talk about that a lot, but think about that through the lens of what's happening right now in Australia. If we are never going to get rid of the cerveza sickness, then how will we ever get out, or how will they ever get out of lockdowns in Australia? The answer is they won't. The only way they'll stop the lockdowns is if they say, you know what, we're just going to have to deal with this. We're going to bite the bullet. And we understand that people are going to be unsafe, and we're going to potentially even lose some lives. But it's either that or keep people locked in their houses for the rest of their lives. That's the decision that they're going to have to make there pretty soon. But let's move on with the email. The most notable example, however, may be the border between the states of Queensland and New South Wales. The town of Coolangatta is on the Queensland side of the border, while the town of Tweed Heads is on the New South Wales side. The two towns, along with other nearby suburbs, are essentially a continuous amalgamation of the Gold Coast metropolitan area. For years, you could have driven from one town to the other, technically cross the border without even realizing it. They say that very similar to Kansas City, the Missouri side and the Kansas side, which I'm very familiar with because I've got real estate there. But then along came Australia's cerveza sickness hysteria. Suddenly a border was erected. Along Dixon Street in Coolangatta, the government erected a temporary wall. It's not exactly the Berlin Wall, with minefields, reinforced concrete, machine gun nests. Actually, the Great Wall of Coolangatta, as it is known, consists mostly of bright orange construction barriers. But it's a wall, nevertheless, designed to keep all of those filthy, diseased Australians from crossing the border. God forbid they're able to walk over to Moxie's Rooftop Bar on Dixon Street. Okay, this past Sunday was Father's Day in Australia. This would normally be a time when children take their dads out for brunch, express their love appreciation. But just like Berlin in the 1960s, there are local families in Australia that are now separated by the Great Wall of Coolangatta. Many Australians reached their breaking point Sunday, defying lockdown orders so that they could meet with family members who lived across the state line. When they met at the wall, fathers on one side, children on the other, think about it. They get a mental image of that, guys. And if you're needing a mental image, Google it. There's pictures online of how this looked. Honestly, it's heartbreaking to see the kids passing gifts across the wall to their dads and trying to steal a hug. Yet this is the depth to which Western civilization has declined in 2021. Highlighting the decline was Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who broke quarantine in the capital city so that he could fly home to Sydney to see his own kids on Father's Day. What's the saying from Animal Farm? All animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. And we see this with politicians throughout history, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in communist Russia. They have a set of rules for themselves, which is very liberal, and a different set of rules for all the plebeians. Regular Australians weren't allowed to do this, but it's all good because the Prime Minister receives special permission from federal health authorities, as he is quote unquote an essential worker, so the rules don't apply to him. That's another interesting historical parallel to East Germany, by the way. As regular people suffered, the party bosses and political elite enjoyed lavish lifestyles because the rules never applied to them. It's important to note that Australia's cerveza sickness stats are similar to the rest of the world. In fact, today, okay, I don't want to go into the stats because that's going to get me banned here. But I think now let's move on, because they describe what's happening in Australia, but then they go back to the story of the Berlin Wall, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Check this out. As a final point, I'll mention that Ursula Bach's fiance, Fred, had the opportunity to travel with her to West Berlin back in 1961. That's when she left, but he didn't. But he chose not to. Fred was a staunch communist. He believed the East German propaganda. He was a fanatic, and he chose to stay. But like all communist fanatics, Fred eventually realized that the totalitarian dream was really a nightmare. He had his awakening, yet by then, it was far too late. So, and again, if you're not subscribed to Simon Black's email list, definitely do so at sovereignman.com. The point there that I wanted to make by really discussing that story from history is just to remind us that as human beings, we have a tendency to view the world around us as though we are living in a snapshot of time. And I think I've discussed this on a few podcasts recently, but I think it's very important we think this through. Most people out there, your friend and family member Fred, the average Joe and Jane, whether they're in Australia or in the United States, they say, oh, well, yeah, George, it's not that bad. So you have to do this. So you have to do that. So there's the mandates. There's these restrictions, but it's just temporary. Or I remember on social media when I came out and discussed the Jim Crow 2.0 laws in New York City, everyone says, oh, well, that's fine. Who cares? I don't want to go to New York City anyway. So my point is people see the world around them as though it's a snapshot, like it's going to stay this way indefinitely. And if it doesn't stay this way, the only other option is that we go back to the way it was in 2019. That's the optimistic view. And the pessimistic view is it just stays like this. The optimistic view is we go back to the way things were. This is only temporary. Once we get beyond the cerveza sickness, governments will go back to the way they were. They will give back all the power that they have taken. They'll give back all the freedom and liberty that they have taken away, and we'll forget this ever happened in 10 years. If you study history, you see that is not the way it works. Anywhere. I don't care where it is. Even in the United States, go back to the Patriot Act. Did we ever get those freedoms back? No, we did not. And in my opinion, it's going to be the exact same moving forward with what we're dealing with, or what we dealt with in 2020 and what we're dealing with in 2021. I think it's far more prudent and it's wiser to look at our current situation as though it's the beginning of a YouTube video. So what we're seeing in 2020 with mandates and lockdown, or what we're seeing today with mandates, what we saw in 2020 with restrictions, with lockdowns, with governments forcing businesses to close down, not allowing you to walk on the beach. That's not a snapshot. That's just the first 30 seconds of this 10-minute YouTube video. And I think I was saying this yesterday, that if that's the first 30 seconds of the video, what does it look like at minute 8 or 9? My point is this continues to progress. The frog is boiled very slowly without even knowing it. And we need to make sure that we understand how history has operated in the past, and therefore what we're most likely living through now, to make sure that we are not that frog that's being boiled slowly. That we are living with our eyes open as to what reality is, and therefore the direction that we're most likely going as a society that is allowing our freedoms to be taken away by these ever increasing governments that have this insatiable lust for power. And even if you're someone that believes that the politicians are useful idiots, I think there's a very good argument for that. The people that are pulling the strings, that are above them, whether you believe it's the World Economic Forum or some other form of global elite, it's the same story. These people have an insatiable lust for power, and if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. All right, guys, I've got to head off to a meeting, so I'm not going to be able to do shout outs. We'll try to do another video later on today to go over some more economic news, and we'll save the shout outs for then. So guys, enjoy your lunch, enjoy your afternoon. We'll see you on the next video.